Okay, morning everybody. So today we are going to continue discussing our factoring technique called completing the square. One thing, hopefully, that you noticed is as you were working through all of the problems that you've done so far, is that the leading coefficient is 1 on all the problems you've done. So if the leading coefficient is not 1, in other words, the A term, then there's an additional step that you need to kind of contend with. And sometimes it can be pretty straightforward, and other times it can make these problems a little bit trickier. So I held off on showing you how to do that until we got a couple of days of practice under our belt first. Now I'm going to show you how to deal with an equation that does not have the leading coefficient to be 1. So here's how we're going to do it. What you do is you start out the same. You start out by grouping the first two terms together as you would normally do. But you can see that this 2 right here is not 1. So that's a problem. That's a problem if you try to complete the square as is, because it won't work that way. So what you have to do is you actually have to factor that 2 out of both of the x terms. And so what you end up with then is something that looks like this: x squared plus 4x. I'm going to leave a space, and then we still have our plus 4 out there, and then we have our 0. So what you can see I did is I factored the 2 out. Now, there is a reason why I left a space right here, and I actually need to leave a space right here as well, which I'll show you. The next step is to just do what you would normally do for completing the square. You're going to do the formula b over 2, the quantity squared, okay? But the b that you have to use is this new b that is formed after you factor the 2 out. You cannot use the 8. I can't stress this enough. You cannot use the 8 as your b, or this won't work. You need to use the 4, okay? So as I go through here, I write 4 divided by 2, the quantity squared. That gives me 2 squared, which then is 4. Okay, so that 4 is going to go right here. I'm going to write plus 4 right there. Now, normally what you've been doing is outside you would write minus 4. But there's a problem. You cannot just write minus 4 right there. Okay. The reason is this 2 would distribute to each one of these things. And so what actually happens is by writing plus 4 right here, you actually created 8 additional numbers there instead of 4. So the number that you put here has to be the opposite of this lead coefficient times whatever number you put there. So 2 times 4 is 8. So therefore, where this, I'll put this 4 right here, this was a plus 4. This has to be a minus 8. And again, why is that a minus 8? It's a minus 8 because 2 times 4 is 8. So this number has to be the opposite of what that number is that you factored out times the number that you added on the inside. Okay, so now moving forward, the rest works the same. The 2 goes right here. You're left with an x. The number that goes right here is this number before you squared it. So that's going to be a plus 2, and it's the quantity squared. Now over here, you'd have a minus 4 equals 0. Okay, from there to solve it, you would start by moving the 4 to the other side. Then you would divide both sides by 4, and you would get x plus 2, the quantity squared, equals 2. Then you need to take the square root. In this case, we're just going to leave it as the square root of 2. And then the last step would be to subtract 2 from both sides, and you get x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. And that's your final answer. Okay, there's 2 answers there. So as you can see, it's pretty much the same. The only extra bit is where in here where you have to factor that 2 out, and then the number that you write here has to be the opposite product of 2 and then the number you put in here. So we'll do a couple more. Hopefully they will make more sense as we do a couple more of these. Okay, so another one. You can see, once again, there's a 2 right there. That can't be a 2. If it is a 2 or any other number besides 1, we need to factor it out first. So we do start out the same. We group the x terms together, and then I'm going to factor the 2 out. I'm going to leave a space. I'm going to write my plus 6. I'm going to still leave another space because we are going to fill in those 2 spaces. Now we're going to do the b over 2. The quantity squared. Remember, the b that we use has to be the new b, has to be this one, okay? Can't be the old one. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1, and negative 1 squared is 1. So I'm going to write a plus 1 right there, okay? So plus 1 goes right there. But remember, the number that goes right here has to be the opposite of this times this. Okay, so 2 times 1 is 2, and so the opposite of 2 is negative 2. So I'm going to write a negative 2. Whoops, as soon as I have the right thing. I'm going to write a negative 2 right there. All right, so we have those 2 extra numbers that we put in. From there, the rest of the steps are the same. I'm going to write my 2. This will factor into x, and then what this number was right here before we squared it. And then 6 minus 2 is 4. So now that is, the square has been completed, and then we're going to solve this. We're going to move the 4 to the other side. And then we're going to divide by 2. Then I'm going to take the square root, which then you should be able to recognize that that is going to create an imaginary solution. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And then I'm going to get the square root of 2. And then the I, please note that that I is outside of the radical. The negative comes out and becomes an I. Okay, and there's your final answer. So what that would tell us is this does not have any real solutions. This only has imaginary solutions. Okay, so I have 2 more for you. And you'll notice this one, and if you notice in the first 2 as well as this one has a lead coefficient, something other than 1. But every time so far, these numbers here, they have come out of the second number. And that makes it much, much easier to solve these. That is not always going to be the case. So the fourth example I'm going to show you will give you an example of where that lead coefficient won't come out evenly, and I will show you how to do that. But in the meantime, let's get this one done. So we got to take the 3 out. And we're left with x squared plus 4x. Leave a space. I'm going to write my plus 8. I'm going to leave another space. Okay. So now what we need to do is we need to do the b over 2, the quantity squared. The b that we're going to use is the new b. It cannot be the old b. Like that. So that becomes 2 squared, which is 4. So remember, I'm going to write plus 4 here. Now on the outside, it's the opposite of this lead coefficient times this. So 3 times 4 is 12. So I need to do minus 12 on the outside. Okay. Now from there, it's a matter of just following the completing the square factoring. So the 3's there, the x goes there. The next number we write is the number that we had before it was squared. Okay, so it's x plus 2, the quantity squared. And then 8 minus 12 is negative 4, and that gives me 0. And then from there, it's just a matter of solving it. Move the 4 to the other side. Then we're going to divide by 3. Then we're going to take the square root. And that's going to need to be cleaned up. Just to show you, I'm going to do this off to the side. If I have the square root of 4 over 3, that is equal to 2 over the square root of 3. But we can't leave a square root on the bottom of a fraction, so we have to rationalize it by multiplying by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3, which gives me 2 root 3 over 3. Okay, so that's what that square root of 4/3 is going to turn into. And then I'm going to subtract 2 from the both sides. So I'm going to end up with 2 root 3 over 3. And there's our final answer. And you can leave it like that. I don't want decimal approximations. Okay, now the last one I'm going to show you was what I talked about before in that last problem. See, there's a 4 right there, but if you look at the 7, the 4 will not come out of the 7 evenly. And so when that happens, it makes these problems a little bit trickier because you deal with a lot more fractions. So let me show you how to deal with that. First thing we do is group. We do need to take the 4 out. We're left with x squared plus, and watch how this works. You just take the number that's there and you divide it by the number that you're factoring out. So since we're factoring out a 4, it becomes 7/4. I'm going to leave myself a space. I'm going to write plus 3, and I'm going to leave another space there. Okay. Now the new b that we have is 7/2. So when we do this formula b over 2, the quantity squared, we get 7/2 over 2 squared. Okay. Now 7/2 divided by 2 is the same as having 7/2 times 1/2. Okay. Remember, keep, change, flip. Keep the first, keep the top, change it from division to multiplication, and flip the bottom number over to 1/2. So then this becomes 7/4 squared, which is 49/16. Okay, now you'll really see why how I'm instructing you to do this and showing you where the numbers come from is important with problems like this, because I'm going to write plus 49/16 there. All right, but remember, this number that goes here, the number that goes there, is the opposite of the product of this number and this number. So now off to the side, we have more scratch work to do. We need to multiply 4 times 49/16. Okay, so when I do 4 times 49/16, you can see the 16 and the 4 would cancel, and you end up with 49/4. So I'm going to subtract 49/4 right there. All right, so now not all of the hard work is done, but a lot of it is done. All right, which is figuring out what this number has to be by doing our b over 2. And then we have to figure out what this number has to be, which is the opposite of the product of this number and this number. Okay, so we got to clean up. So we have 4. Whoops, can't use that. Sorry. We have a 4. Okay, and then we have an x. Now this, remember, the number that comes after the x, right? So there's a number there, and it's that quantity squared. This number is always this number right here before you squared it. So that makes it nice. We don't have to think about how x squared plus 7/4 x plus 49/16 factors. It always factors the same. It's always x and then whatever the number was before you squared it. So in this case, it was 7/4. So we just put a 7/4 right there. Now we do need to clean up that 3 minus 49/4. So 3 minus 49/4. Okay. We need to make this 3 over 1. And then we're going to multiply by 4 over 4. So we get 12 over 4 minus 49 over 4, which gives me negative 37 over 4. All right. Okay, so we're getting there. Now we need to solve by moving the 37/4 to the other side. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 4, or the same idea is I'm going to multiply by 1/4. So I have x plus 7 over 9, the quantity squared, equals 37 over 16. Remember, this is a 9. Now I'm going to square root both sides. I'm going to have x plus 7 over 9 equals positive negative square root of 37 over 4, because the square root of 16 is 4. The last step is going to be to subtract the 7/9 from both sides, and you get x equals negative 7 over 9 plus or minus the square root of 37 over 4. And you can leave it like that. You don't need to combine the two fractions. So there you go, guys. I hope that made sense. If it didn't, try to go back and rewind and take a look at another, watch the video a second time. It might help you. Also, as you guys know, please ask me when we are in person, or if you are outside of class time and you need help, email me. I am more than happy to get back to you as quick as I possibly can. Have a great day.